right, Chapter 18 for Staying Fat for Sarah Burns. Life is turning into a play. The theater is this hospital room, and mine is the finest seat in the house. Mark Britton entered stage center again late last night after Lemry left. I was watching a rerun of Taxi, and I don't know how long he stood there before I noticed, and invited him in. He's getting out tomorrow and was freaked out about facing everyone. "What would you do, Moby?" he said. "No offense, but you used to be the reigning prince of fools. I mean, let's face it, you ate a lot of shit. You and your friend Sarah Burns." I punched mute on the remote and rolled over to take pressure off my shoulder. The man had a point. If Sarah Burns and I had saved it instead of eating it, we'd have the beginnings of a fertilizer dynasty today. I really did want to help Mark, if for no other reason than it's nice to be an expert on something, even if is the ingestion of foul foreign substances emanating from deep in the bowels of my enemies. I wanted to say things would return to normal for him as soon as he got settled into school, but the time for bullshit has passed. I don't know how close my brush with death was, but it seemed close. The time for bullshit has passed. You know, Mark, people call me Moby because I'm a chunko swimmer. I could get pissed, threaten to go after anyone who calls me that. I'm not a fighter, but I could get up for it if I thought I needed to. I wouldn't always win, but you'd have to want to mix it up to take the chance. I truly believe I could get people to quit calling me Moby, but I could never stop what they think when they see me in a tank suit. And I couldn't stop what they'd say about me if I went around with a chip on my shoulder. Hey man, the sun comes up, the sun goes down. Winter turns into spring, spring turns to summer, and Eric Calhoun is a barrel-chested, no-waisted hulkster. Besides, folks calling me Moby is pretty funny, don't you think? He shrugged. I won't call you that anymore. That's not the point. I don't mind it anymore. In fact, I like it. It's who I am. I'm Moby. The point is, if you go around making things look different than what they are, and what everybody knows they are, nobody's going to want to get close to you because they know you don't tell the truth. You just have to tell the truth in a way people recognize. Britton looked toward the window, watched his reflection in the pitch black of the night outside. His chin quivered. How do I tell the truth about what I've done? How do I say I sent Jody to get an abortion by herself when I knew how scared and confused she was? How do I tell people that? I mean, what words do I say? You say you fucked up. You say you were wrong. Mark was quiet. Then he said, "Could you do it?" I don't know. I really don't. But if I were in your shoes, I should. He was quiet again. Then, "You know who came and saw me today?" "Who?" "Steve Ellerby's dad." "No shit. What did he want?" Mark smiled. He said if I was interested, he'd be willing to spend some time with me looking at different perspectives on Christianity. That's a good offer, I said. He's a smart man. He smiled again. Yeah, well, I told him my dad might not look too kindly on that, and he said, "Mark, you're only 17 years old, and you've already tried to take your own life. I'd say that means something's not working. If you need more information to make things work, I'd get busy with it. So I guess I might. No reason I have to tell my dad everything." He looked at his watch. "Look, I gotta go. Just thought I'd check in before I got out." He turned to leave. I said, "Hey, Mark." And he stopped. "I'll bet if you called Jody and talked about this, it'd go down easier at school." He considered a minute. "I'll think about that." Act 2 opened when I blinked awake to one of those half-hour advertisements for a surefire way to stop male pattern baldness in its ugly tracks, and Sarah Burns stood in her coat beside my bed, shaking me gently. It was after hours, so I knew she had sneaked in. "I'm leaving, Eric," she said. I stopped to say goodbye. "Leaving? Where are you going?" away. An empty pit expanded in my stomach. You can't talk Sarah Burns out of anything. Jesus, I said, don't leave. Please don't. I have to. Why? God, Sarah Burns, this is the best things have ever been. I mean, you have a place. You're safe. I'm not safe as long as my dad's out there, she said. If I'm gone, and nobody knows where I am, then everyone will be safer. As long as he knows I'm around, you won't be safe, and neither will Lemry. But he won't try to get revenge. He just wants me. He's crazy, but he's simple crazy. He would have killed you that night, but not to be mean. He'd have killed you to get to his family. That's me. And he'd kill me before he'd let anyone else have me. I just have to get away. Where would you go? There's this place I know about in the Midwest, Kansas, I think. It's a group home where they take care of handicapped kids, kids with terminal illnesses and permanent disfigurement, stuff like that. I read about it 5 years ago in Life magazine, and I always thought I might go there and work someday. I was smart even back then. Never let my dad see the magazine. He won't find me in a million years. But you won't even have a high school diploma if you leave now. At least wait until graduation. She shook her head, and that old look of disgust popped up. Getting stabbed didn't make you any smarter, did it? You think my dad's going to wait until graduation to come for me? I thought I heard him in the backyard tonight. Look, Eric, don't argue with me. I came because I might never see you again. All our lives, I've been pretty tough on you. She smiled, and I watched her scars crease and stretch in that old familiar way. I remember seeing how you stuffed yourself to the brim every day after you started swimming, staying fat for me. Jesus, Eric, you were such a dork. She touched my hand. But see, I didn't want to be so mean. It's just how I survived. Lemry helped me see that, just by being nice to me. When we were on our way to Reno, I felt like a regular person for the first time since I got burned. We laughed and told jokes and stopped to eat in these greasy little restaurants in towns that nobody's ever heard of. And for a little while, I felt like I'd stepped outside my prison. But you can stay with Lemry, I pleaded. You can have more times like that. If it wasn't for my dad, I would, she said. I really would. I want to tell Lemry that, okay? The panic that had been crawling up my throat began choking me. Listen, Sarah Burns, maybe this is just selfish, but I don't know how I can stand the thought of you being out there and not knowing where. Eric, I can take care of myself. I know, but I don't know if I can. I can't remember a time when there was no you, and I can't imagine a time like that now. You're just going to have to learn to be tough, she said, and the cold crept in. Look, I've been thinking a lot, and the only way I've held on was by hooking onto memories of my mother. Fantasies of my mother, actually. I really thought someday I'd get back with her and find out there was a place for me. When my dad was at his worst, and you can't even imagine it, Eric, I would just go away in my head and think of my mother. I remember all those times she dressed me up and took me downtown and played with me in the park and read me stories. I knew I'd never be pretty again, but I'd have someplace to be. And even when I had to give all that up, I still hung on for the day she'd come back and put my dad away for good. Well, that ended in Reno. My mother is gutless. It's over. She was quiet a second while I desperately tried to think of something to stop her. Listen, I got a bus to catch. Just let me do it. Let those newspaper people know I've disappeared. That way Dad will know. Then Sarah Burns bent over and hugged me, and I felt the wet stickiness of her craggy face for what I believed was the last time. Tell you what, I've had enough of this shit. I've had enough of not being able to get anything to turn out my way. It's 2 a.m, and I'm standing in my doorway waiting for the hall to clear so I can get out of here the back way. My clothes were in that little closet by the door, so at least I don't have to go another freezing night with my fat butt hanging out the back of a hospital gown. I called Emery and told her to pick me up in the parking lot, then hung up real quick so she couldn't try to talk sense into me. Her curiosity will get her there. I'll call Mom from the phone booth in the parking lot to tell her not to panic when the hospital reports me missing. Emery's tires crunched to a halt on the frozen snow as I hang up the phone in the booth. Carver answered, so I told him to take the phone off the hook so the hospital can't call my mother and scare her. Carver is getting better all the time. He made sure I wasn't about to tangle with old man Burns again, then told me to take care of whatever needed it. After that, we'd all sit down and make a plan. I'm sure he'll wake Mom and tell her, but he'll also keep her from getting crazy. I've got a sling and a thick pad over my shoulder blade, so if I'm careful, I won't cause myself additional injury. It'll just hurt. What are you doing, Moby? Lemery asks as I slide into the seat. What's going on? I tell her what Sarah Burns said and point her toward the Greyhound station. We've got a little time, I say. I called and the next bus doesn't leave until 3:15. Lemery's tires spin in the snow as we fishtail onto the street. By 3, we've been standing next to the storage lockers out of sight and directly across from the ticket counter for more than a half an hour. And there's no sign of Sarah Burns. My shoulder aches like a hot bowling ball is lodged inside, and sweat pours off me like a watershed. But I keep my mouth shut and my eyes peeled. Are you sure she's taking the bus? Lemery asks. She said, I got a bus to catch, I answer. Her exact words. She told you she had a bus to catch? Lemery says, more to herself than to me. That means she probably doesn't. If she wants to get away clean, she's not going to tell you how. Not with your big mouth. In seconds, we're back on the street, shooting down the unplowed street toward Amtrak, which is 10 or 12 blocks from the bus station. I hope we're right, Lemery says. God, I hope we're right. We're right. Sarah Burns sits on a long bench in the brightly lit cavernous hall, her feet propped up on her raggedy suitcase, scarred face hidden deep in a book. She's famous now, and though her picture was never in the paper, anyone who sees her knows exactly who she is. She glances up as we approach and leaps to her feet, but Lemery is on her like a gentle bulldogger, wrestling her to a halt, then sinking with her to the floor. Just let me go, Sarah Burns says quietly. Please, Miss Lemery, just let me go. No can do, Lemery says back, and I scoot over to grab Sarah Burns' bag. The only way this will be over is if I leave, Sarah Burns tells her. You don't know my dad. Nobody knows my dad. Lemery rises to her feet, pulling Sarah Burns with her. She grasps her shoulders firmly in both hands and looks her straight in the eye. I don't give a good goddamn about your dad. I've heard enough about your dad. He used to tie me up. He wouldn't let me eat. He locked me up sometimes. He's bad, Miss Lemery. Then he'll go to jail, Lemery says without flinching. I'm taking over here. That's it. You're out of the pilot seat. Sarah Burns starts to protest, but Lemery tightens her grip and Sarah Burns folds, falling into her. Lemery says, That's better. Shit, this was too easy. All right, Chapter 18 Analysis. In a 5-stage plot diagram, or Freytig's pyramid, there are sort of multiple sections. There's the first section that comes across, and that section comes across and then goes up and then comes back down, and then there's another section. The first section is exposition, where we get to know the characters. There's rising action, there's climax, there's falling action, and then there's resolution. The interesting thing about this book is we feel like the exposition right here, that beginning part, that was pretty straightforward, first few chapters. The rising action goes up, 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 and then normally it comes back down. But right now, it doesn't feel like we've had any climactic event, and it doesn't feel like we're going to come back down ever. It just keeps going up. If we look at the spot we are in the book, okay, 269 out of 296. That's not a lot of time to wrap stuff up. And there still doesn't feel like there's a climactic event. I mean, this is climactic, but boy, there were a bunch of other things that were climactic as well. This is a very high energy, high intensity book. Mark Britton talking about things, that was intense. Sarah Burns coming in and talking about things, that was intense. Those two things, though, seem like more character development again, though, fleshing out the characters, getting us to understand them better. But chasing down Sarah Burns, the misdirection of telling them that she was at the bus and then going to the train station, all of that is climactic. I'm not sure it feels as climactic as the knife incident, but it's still climactic. And to top it off, she talks about how she was abused by her father, and it's just really hard to hear that he tied her up and wouldn't feed her, and it's hard to imagine a parent treating their child, or anyone for that matter, but especially your own child, in that way. And there's only a little bit left of the book, about 27 pages, so we'll have to see what happens. All right, stay tuned.